Namaste. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Anamkara Meditation Thursday night program. And with all my heart, with all my love, I'm just delighted to be with you this evening in this sacred gathering, coming together to dive into the truth of who we are, the truth of what all of creation is, the unfolding of the divine in the moment. So we are able to gather literally folks from around the world, around the country, in this space of consciousness that actually doesn't know physical space. So it's the great thing about that universal consciousness. It holds all so intimately, so closely. And so here we are in that divine embrace and sharing that together and exploring what it is for the ordinary mind to come into right relationship with the truth of who we are, come into accord with what's our highest nature, so we can live in the spontaneous flow of that. It starts out with so many practices, so many things to understand for the mind, only because it's gotten so far away from the ground of being, the infinite here and now, as everything is our own self. So all our practices are aimed at that. So this gathering is this sacred, unique kind of space that invites us to know that with the highest intention, that we can know it for ourselves and become free of suffering, and in so doing become fully empowered to help relieve the suffering of all beings, all living things at all times and all places. We want to be fully empowered, not only to be fully free of suffering ourselves, but to free all beings of suffering. So thank you for being ones joining us this evening, coming with the power of your presence, the power of your practice, the power of your intention. This is the most sublime gathering I know of, so just a pure delight for me to be in your company. So thank you for joining us from wherever you might be. So this evening, one of the things that I was thinking about was we haven't had a chance to talk or discuss things in a while, and so much goes on, both in our own psyches, but in the world too, as it impacts our psyches. And it all is a challenge for how do we sustain a state, or even how do we enter a state that we'd like to sustain? So the practices obviously aimed at doing that, but how do we engage in them in skillful ways that really supports us in our everyday lives? Because that's really critical, and the critical use of the practices to bring us home to the truth of who we are and see past the fog of what is the collective ignorance, because that's what we're dealing with, this collective ignorance, this collective delusion. It's always been there. So it's not new. Buddha would talk about it as well as sages and saints across traditions, across time. Lao Tzu talked about it. Confucius would talk about it. So it goes back as far as we can remember or have records of. But how do we then take that essence, power of practice, which is rooted in consciousness itself? Fortunately, it's a consciousness that never leaves us. We only leave it. So that's the key on how to shift. So any thoughts or questions related to what I was just saying, or unrelated, that's fine.
Yeah, I don't even know how to put this out there, but it's it's like are the ones like some like us and many more, are we the chosen ones? I mean, that sounds really funny, but let me put it in context, because a lot of people who, either claim to want to be spiritual, or that the new age spiritual whole thing, they um, they can't get past the reality of what is real for them at in the moment, or
Right,
just the way it is now through the mind, right?
right,
So when you start talking about them, about some deeper stuff like what we talk about here, or
yeah,
their true Buddhist traditions and whatnot, and Advaita Vedanta and Kashmir Shaivism, all these, it it just goes right by them, because there's no way they can understand. So how is it that we expect to sort of bring this practice into the world, when it just never seems to take a hold,
right.
for anybody who can't imagine. I mean, the only reason I'm here is because my friend reached Kundalini, right?
Mm.
And it gives me, years ago I told you about,
Yeah.
and what he told me was just unbelievable. He's a great, true friend of mine. So I trusted him, and it made me realize that there is something really beyond who I think I am. But that's the only reason. If I just met you, and if I read a book on Buddhism, I would never think of
Yeah.
Kundalini and beyond my brain.
Right.
That's where 99% of the world is, it seems like. So
Right.
I have this real hard conflict sort of within me. Uh, so I don't know.
Right.
It's not a question, but it is what it is. What I
Right.
just
Well, what I hear is how to understand that, because you asked about chosen, and well, what chooses us? Well, what happens is we choose ourself. We choose to know the true self. We choose to know our Buddha nature, which is universal, inherent to every being. But the Eastern traditions, especially, where reincarnation, that we actually evolve and our consciousness evolves across lifetimes. And so there is a disparity between where a person's consciousness has evolved to, both across lifetimes and even within this lifetime. You may look back and say, gee, where my consciousness was when I was 20 is not where it is now. So it evolved in this lifetime. Well, the same kind of evolutionary process can occur across lifetimes, does occur across lifetimes. And that's certainly what the yogic traditions, the Buddhist traditions, the Kundalini traditions, the Tantra traditions are all looking at that we are all equally divine. There's no one more divine than anyone else. So chosen, not chosen, really is kind of an ego thing, either individually or collectively, that creates a delineation, us against them, chosen versus non-chosen. Doesn't work. Not true. Because the divine, it says, you're all me. It doesn't say, oh, you're me, but you're not me. No, everything sprung from the infinite. From the infinite comes the infinite remains. It's one of the opening mantras we used to do all the time. So the understanding is, yes, we're at different evolutionary places, which is why it's also for people who have evolved, awakened more. We don't have to be a fully enlightened being, but just sharing more. Like your friend, who you had the good karma to have as a friend, who you were really connected to, really trusted. So when he told you something that was really out of the ordinary, you didn't just blow it off. You went, there must be something to this. So each one of us is a carrier of that, of the ways you've experienced it, that you share with somebody that may be that awakening moment, or additively is giving another drop to that reservoir that's building in them of there's something more going on here than the ordinary mind. So as we walk what we know, as we walk even the virtues that are cultivated in our practices of loving compassion, kindness, right? That embrace the equal vision, equality consciousness. As we are walking that into the world and treating others that way, we're sending that message. For some, that's a wake-up call. They go, oh, this is really, he treats everybody so nicely, whether he's in a restaurant and dealing with the wait staff, or somebody who's a gaffer on a set, whatever it might be, he's got this equal vision of people. That communicates something. So we're carriers of that truth in our own way into our everyday lives. And that's helping to build that shift in the collective unconscious. Now, Jung talks about that more than most, that the notion that the collective unconscious, out of which springs archetypes, high truths, all these things are in our unconscious, that's evolving. And it evolves very slowly. So that's why sort of the group evolution lags behind individual evolution. Individuals can evolve at a much faster pace. There are what I call the Jataka tales. They're tales of Buddha in his prior incarnations, where he was evolving the vehicle he was going to need to be Sakyamuni Buddha. So that didn't just spring out of nowhere. That too had an evolutionary process. So when we understand that this evolution of consciousness is unfolding across lifetimes, it helps us relax about, okay, I'm not going to get it done today. It's going to take a while. Patanjali's Yoga Sutra start out saying a yogi is one who engages in these practices enthusiastically for lifetimes. So it's right up front. This is not a quick task. When they talk about a quick path, like Kundalini is talked about as the quick way, then if you read the fine print, quick way, oh yeah, that could take up to 8 lifetimes. Now, I think that's still a little theory, but again, it was like, yeah, quick compared to 10 million lifetimes? It's a great number. So the understanding that still this evolutionary process that's unfolding and all that we're doing in our practices. And when I say practice, I don't mean just sitting on a cushion or coming to a sangha or doing the chants and mantra. Our practices are that how do we stay mindful of the truth of who we are and the truth of what another being is and the context of this divine creation? How do we hold that in the moment when we're being assailed by politics, economics, the grotesque nature of violence in the world, individual and collective, that we have to still be able to hold this space of how do we rest in the divine that gave birth to all this, that's evolving all this, and come to know that in ourselves and see that what's going on in the world really is a function of the ignorance of the individuals acting out the wrong identification. That it all comes out of thinking you're a limited being that then engenders all the things that you want and need, all the fear, all the anger, all that stuff, all springs out of that. That's why the yogic and Buddhist traditions say, you want to cut the root of all suffering and all that's going on so badly in the world, you have to come home to the truth of who you are. Come to that. Walk that into the world. Then you're completing your task of evolution, and you will be doing the most we can for humanity as a whole to evolve. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. It makes sense. For some reason, I still feel like there's a discrepancy between what you're talking about and the life on Earth. A lot of people say God is evil because how could he punish these
Right.
kids? How could you read about, how does he starve these kids and, all this stuff, or how,
Right.
the earthquake and he killed, 50,000 people.
Right.
So then people get into that conversation, and then I have to question myself. Yeah, where is God? What is
Right.
God? What is the love that you're talking about? How does that implement itself into this world, which is really catastrophic in a lot of
Right.
ways?
Right. This is a totally different paradigm. I mean, from the ordinary person's mindset, saying that, oh, there's an omnipotent being who's supposed to be all-loving, should just intervene and make things different. And that was, a few weeks back, and I put out the video, why all this suffering in the world? As well as, it was like, oh Lord, why all this suffering? I think was the title of the video. And then followed it up again later with another video from Satsang, talking about who's the diabolical one. Because diabolos, talking about, is Greek, it means separate, to tear asunder, to separate. Well, that's mind. The ordinary mind makes differences, makes something that's, there's me and there's you, and you shouldn't have what you're going to have because it's going to take from me, so I'm going to take what you have, and I need more and more and more, like that. So it's all mind-born. That was the whole understanding from the mystics tradition, was that, oh no, the divine says, here's what here, I'm going to give you all this power, you can do all these things, and in the end, you're all going to be free. You're all going to see, in the end, that this ephemeral world is not the eternal reality in which your consciousness really dwells. Your full consciousness is in the eternal, and in that eternal that's knowable here and now is where that boundless love, boundless compassion, boundless wisdom as our true nature, as the nature of all that is and all that we are and all beings, all the differences dissolve. And then we come to know that. But we inhabit the individual mind and its unenlightened state. Enlightened means knowing. the light of truth, the light of I am that and all is that. That's what we're talking about. Acting from I'm just this, I'm just a limited being, and out of that comes I'm afraid of this, I need this, I want that, somebody else has got it, I got to scramble to get it. If some have more, some have less, I want more, I don't want less. All that was part of, the monopoly game. It's like a game. Okay, here's the game, but the end of the game, the intent is for everybody to come to know the infinite and reside in that rapturous state and treat each other as their own divine self. Mm? So we see it in other religions. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. It's a universal understanding. Underneath it is, yes, because we're all equal. We're all equally divine. We're all equally deserving of love, compassion, and all that we need to flourish, right? But when one is inhabiting this very limited self, and with that all the grasping and all the delusion that goes with it, then we act out and create a very different world. So bringing the truth into the world, it has evolved. Democracy was a major leap forward in equality vision, that we're not going to have just kings and lords and divine right of kings. And no, everybody should be equally sharing power. But now these people have crept back into power saying, no, we should only be the ones with power and money, and all you peons should, suffer. No, that's okay. That's a step back. We need to get back on track and shift that back. But that occurred, and that ideal of democracy has worked in places, not perfectly, is a giant collective leap forward in collective consciousness. So we keep evolving it. We keep holding the highest. And we keep saying, no, that's not it. We need to move this forward to bring that highest truth into reality here in this plane of being. So it doesn't just exist in an eternal ideal.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So any other thoughts?
So I just wanted to say, I know exactly the draw of trying to be with people who are so much in their mind and so much in the world, because I'm in my mind a lot. And because of the wonderful teachings that I've had from Lawrence and the studies that I've done, I can understand now that I can feel intuitively, I feel it so strongly, the truth that I am that. But I can't explain it, and I can't get into my mind. And so I just try not to be in my mind. And when I do, I just have to come back to that feeling that's kind of always there. So it's like there's two parts to us that I'm learning, to live with. And I just read a wonderful quote by, I think, St. Teresa of Avalon recently, who said, try not to think a lot, but try to love more.
Yeah.
And so, love being, just engaging and open to everything. So
Yeah.
I just put that out there.
Yeah. And it's hard walking in a world where people are acting out of ignorance and causing so much suffering. And it's so clear. It's one of the clearest things that we get to see is when we're in ignorance, not only do we flail about causing suffering for ourselves, we flail about causing suffering for other beings. And that's part of the opening of the heart, is we start to have the compassion that says, I don't want people to suffer. I don't want to suffer. I don't want to grin and bear it. Don't want to muscle through. I want to get free of the suffering. I want to know the causes of suffering, and I want to know how to get free of it. And that's what, the sages and saints and Buddha talked about all the time. How do you get free of suffering? And how do you free others? Well, first you have to get free yourself so that you're really clear and established in that, so we can abide in that, and that we can see that, the suffering that's arising right now is arising from so many different influences, so many different energies and dynamics, all happening in the moment. So that in many ways, they're incomprehensible. But what we can do is say, but I can take a hold of my awareness, my consciousness. See, Where is that going to rest? What's that going to dwell on? Mm? And elevate that. And if somebody asks a question, you share the best. And if they can't hear it, they can't hear it. It's not your failing, nor can we hammer a person into evolution, right? Any more than you can make a child suddenly have the self-regulation skills of an adult. Doesn't happen. They have to mature. Lots of things have to evolve for them to get to that point. And so that's why the evolutionary process over eons looks at, there are baby souls, there are young souls, there are mature souls, there are old souls. And you can say it has nothing to do with the age of the body. There are old souls that are kids, and you can just be around them and you can feel it, and they have an intuitive understanding. But if we understand that ourselves, then we can be less frustrated with what's going on and how frustrating it is to not be able to make a dent in some people. They're just not at that evolutionary phase.
Yeah, it's quite the test of faith, even for us, for me, because it's not only like the Trumps of the world and all that. It's more like nature. I mean, nature also, cancer and heart disease. Like, why? You have to ask
Right.
yourself, why is there so much of that kind of suffering in this world?
Yeah.
And then there's never really an answer other than this is temporary and there's a better something else on the other side, or not heaven, but there's an evolution process.
Right.
Yeah, but it takes a lot of faith.
Well, and it takes the direct knowing that when we start to enter those states, we call them states of meditation, they're really the state of reality. The ordinary state of mind is the altered state. The true state, the eternal state, is the state of meditation. That's a state of unity consciousness. When we tap into that, it doesn't matter what the body's going through. And I've talked about that myself in countless experiences that unfortunately too many surgeries, too many operating rooms, too many emergency rooms. But it's also shown me, even in the midst of this crushing pain or even dying, that consciousness is pure, rapturous, all-embracing, loving, present. So that informs my experience. And yes, the mind-body state goes up and down. So part of what is also inherent to the spiritual traditions, especially the East, or sadhana practices, is to realize we're not trying to get a permanent state of mind, because the mind is in flux. We'll stabilize it, it'll become more steady, but we're not looking to try and make the mind consciousness itself. The eternal, the unwavering nature of consciousness. What Buddha talked about as the four immeasurables, what the yogis talked about as Satchit Ananda. That rapturous, loving, compassionate, blissful state of pure consciousness that's unchanging. That's the state of consciousness. You put that in an ephemeral thimble called body and mind, and it becomes subject to the vagaries of that thimble. The mind isn't always in a great state. The body's not always in a great state. It's going to get old. It's going to get decrepit. It's going to lose things. It's going to die. The 5 remembrances of Tibetan Buddhism were a practice that kids start when they're 2 years old, about the ephemeral nature of the body and how it's going to grow old. So don't put everything on, my body, the state of my body. The mind, the state of my mind. Do we want to optimize them? Obviously, because that's a domain we can reduce suffering. But when we realize we can't eliminate suffering, because there's certain components of suffering that are inherent to having a body and a mind. But knowing the fullness of being allows us to be present with those varying states of body and mind while abiding in that peace, abiding in that joy. So that we're not just riding the roller coaster of mind and body states. So the impact of practice over time is to go, I really reside in that. And that's going to carry us through anything that the body goes through, anything the mind goes through, even death. It's why it was so important, why the yogis of all traditions, Buddhist and Hindu, looked at this is also the practice that sets us up for being able to move through even death with equanimity and enter that rapturous state, now free of body. So that's the context it's held in. That's what we come to know as we deepen our practice with that. Come to know it directly. All right, well, this is good. Why don't I switch back, and then we'll chant a bit and enter that state, inherent state of freedom, the state of knowing, the state of the truth of who we are. Huh? So all the practices are really aimed at taking us home to the fullness of being, the fullness of who we are. And it's literally unimaginable for the mind. This is why it's so hard to grasp, because it's ungraspable. It's so challenging for the mind because the mind has never encountered anything that, typically, given enough effort, enough time, it can conceptually grasp it, it can do something. But the fullness of being, the fullness of the truth of who we are, is beyond that completely. So that's why freedom comes from letting go. Freedom comes from letting go of all the notions we've had about ourselves, all the notions of what the divine is, what the infinite, any notion, any idea, anything is going to be a limitation that's mind-born. Entering the state of freedom is entering the state of that pure awareness that is illuminating the mind. How can we have a thought? What's illuminating our perceptions right in this moment? Our perceptions of the sound, the perceptions of the screen. That's all illuminated by awareness itself. And so in the practices, we're letting go of the mind to just come back to what is it to be awareness itself. Not the content it's illuminating, the thought, the feeling, the memory, the sensation, the reactions that we had, something that's going on with the body. All those things are content illuminated by the light of consciousness, the boundless, infinite light of consciousness that we are. This is a poem from Invite Them In, she said, that will be available by the end of the month. It's called Nobody. My beloved, essence of all, the breath breathes itself. No longer is there a need or even a desire to breathe. You have made me nobody and everybody while free from anybody. Breath, no breath. Body, no body. Me, no me. All wisps of smoke viewed from afar, illuminated by you, your glorious light, your effulgence alone is. That's what we come to know as the truth of who we are. That radiant effulgence of being that illuminates the experience of inhabiting a mind and a body, a life in this domain, all that's happening. None of it would be known without the light of consciousness. We've become identified with what it's illuminating. We want to return to who is the luminous one, illuminating it all. Always, all times, all places. It illuminates the waking state. It illuminates the dream state. It illuminates the deep sleep state. And it illuminates itself in that transcendence that also embraces all that is as its own self. We let go into that. A vibration of that is mantra. Now, Om Namah Shivaya is a vibration of that. So mantras were a throb of consciousness first heard in deep meditation, and that continues to happen for people throughout history, right to this day, hearing the mantra arising from a state of consciousness, a throb of the infinite saying, I am that. Om Namah Shivaya. I bow to the auspicious one. The auspicious one is that pure, radiant consciousness, the truth of who you are, the truth of all that is. So when we become absorbed in that, it's a way for the mind to become absorbed in something, because the mind is a thing, it's a form, it is attracted to form. Mantra is a sound form of the infinite that dissolves into just the thought form of the infinite, that dissolves in formlessness of just pure awareness of the infinitude of being. This is what we are all capable of. Om Namah Shivaya. 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 Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Now just resting in the silent repetition of Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Whether it's fast or slow, with the breath on its own, becoming absorbed in that throb of the infinite. The root awareness is I am that. Hum Sa. I am the mantra. I am the source of mantra. I am that auspicious one. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Rest in that awareness. Repeatedly letting go of the mind, its thoughts, its content, to just watch it while being absorbed in Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. Namah Shivaya. Om 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 Namah Shivaya. We end with this prayer that may all our practices truly benefit everyone, and may all beings know complete freedom from suffering. Namaste. Taking refuge in the truth, coming back to the fullness of being. So much of everyday life and our entire culture is aimed at just being lost in the mind and mind states. And, oh, if you have this, you'll feel better. If you don't have this other thing, you get rid of it, you'll feel better. Everything is aimed at states of mind, states of body, dependent on conditions. So the meditative state is beyond that. That's where freedom from suffering lies, so that we can rest in the fullness of being, regardless of what the state of mind or body is. That's freedom. Because the mind and body, they're going to go through all kinds of states, and ultimately they're going to pass away. And they may pass away gently in the night, or they might pass away going through the final karmas of this life that may be painful. If we're established, if we're abiding in the state of being that holds with great compassion and love the state of the mind and body, it doesn't reject it, it doesn't denigrate it, has compassion for what this vehicle goes through, that we created to live through the karmas, live through the experiences, to further evolve in this life. The state of being that is the truth of who we are rests at all times in that equanimity, that joy, that compassion, that embraces mind and body, all minds, all bodies, with love, compassion, patience, and kindness. So that's why we can tap into those qualities that aren't contingent upon, I can only be nice if my mind is in a good mood. I can only feel good if my body's in a good state. No, the state of being is these eternal qualities. And the more they impact mind and body, the more we become transparent to them, the more we abide in that state of being, and that state of being informs mind and body, then the steadier that experience is, the more lasting. So that's the emphasis on practice, is coming back to the truth of who we are, moment by moment, every moment is an opportunity to know that, experience that, and live it into the world. Oh, both because it frees us from suffering in the moment and it frees others from suffering, at least from the suffering that might be caused by us flailing about in suffering. So that's why we come to abide in the truth of who we are and bring that loving compassion, that kindness, that wisdom into the world over and over and over as we evolve individually and as we evolve collectively. So thank you for being ones doing that, doing these practices. Just a simple practice like repeating mantra, meditating. It seems so simple, obviously hard to do to get the mind to stay steady with that. So thank you for being ones making that effort to abide in the truth of who you are more and more. Because as you do that, you bring more and more of that love, compassion, wisdom, and kindness that is your very nature. You bring it into your everyday life, in your everyday relationships. So thank you for your dedication to that. And I look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks. I look forward to seeing you then. Jai Ma.